Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the One Spark Network. My name is Eric J. Hecker, and I am joined today by the wonderful Sheila Seppi. Welcome, Sheila.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, yeah. It took us a bit to get this one to happen, but I'm glad that we're actually pulling it
Yeah.
off. Sheila is one of our speakers at the Snippy event this year. It's her first time speaking, and it's a really exciting event, Sheila. I'm looking forward to having you there. But just for the folks that aren't aware, Snippy is a conference where leading experts converge to present the latest research on high strangeness, metaphysics, ancient civilizations, and astronomy. This event is held outdoors at the rugged and desert swept King Family Orbit near Mosca, Colorado. Conference sessions are held in two large enclosed tents. Camping is encouraged and available for any size trailer, RV, or tent. Hotel options are available just 15 minutes from KFO in Alamosa, Colorado. So if you want to find out more, folks, you can go to www.snippy.space. But with that being said, the more important thing today is our special guest, Sheila Seppi. Sheila is an internationally recognized author, multidimensional healer, and spiritual teacher who has dedicated her life to exploring the deeper architectures of human consciousness. She is the author of Walk-ins, The Cosmology of the Soul, and the co-author of Cosmic Convergence, Journeys of Walk-ins, Starseeds and Hybrids. Works inspired by her own profound experience of becoming a soul exchange walk-in 1999. Holding a Master of Metaphysical Sciences, Sheila acts as a spiritual way shower, blending ancestral healing practices, shamanism, and energy missions. She is also the visionary founder of the Conscious Awakening Network and Spirit Way Ministries. And she hosts the popular international podcasts Cosmic Conversations and Conscious Awakening, making her a leading grounded voice for modern audiences navigating a spiritual evolution. Welcome, Sheila.
Hi, thanks so much. Nice to be here.
Yes, thank you for that's quite the background. I'm new to your stuff, but I'm very big into energies and consciousness. I think there's so much to be learned. I just recently had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell from the telepathy tapes, and they're right there with that consciousness thing. What is really
Absolutely.
going on around us, Sheila?
That's right. Yeah. And if we really knew what was going on around us, our minds would be blown because everything is consciousness. And from what I've been able to see, well, first as the walk in, I couldn't even fathom the concept at first. And once I settled into it and really accepted it, my next question was, how in the world could something like this happen? And that set me off on, like a 20-year search on consciousness. And that's really remained the focus with a lot of the work that I've done.
Excellent. I'm gonna jump right into this, Sheila. And as I mentioned to you beforehand, I'll just let the audience know that this conversation is going to deal less with Sheila's actual research, but more of her path on getting from where she started to where she is today. But with that being said, Sheila, I'm going to just jump right into the first question here.
Sure.
Before September 1999, you were living what many would consider a traditional life as a mother of three in Virginia. Looking back, how would you describe your ordinary world and the identity that you held at the time?
Yeah, I was a mother of three. I had a very demanding job. Obviously, I was married. Life went on. I took the kids to church on Sundays, had a very traditional background, and I was in a tight little box. But I was also a very sick person. And over the course of several years, I had been diagnosed with the potential of bone cancer, and even had an oncologist and the surgery, but bone cancer, brain tumors, fibromyalgia, chronic
Wow.
fatigue. I used to walk with a cane, erythema nodosum, the beginning stages of RA. They told me the beginning stages of MS, you name it, and my body had it.
How old
And
were you at the time, Sheila?
at that time, I was well, it started in my 20s, but by
Wow.
the time I was 38, it had really manifested into a severe illness that kept me on the couch most of the time.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's rough when you're that young, and with kids. And what were you doing for a living at the time? What was your profession?
At the time, I was working in tourism.
Okay.
And so, it was a 7 county program. And so I had to work with a lot of different municipalities. I had to, it was pretty high demanding as far as all the presentations, et cetera, the marketing and everything. On top of it, at that time, I had a very dysfunctional marriage. Everything in my life seemed to be in a downward spiral as far as that went. And I really believe that helped to exacerbate and bring on the event that happened later,
Gotcha.
which actually totally healed my body.
So with that being said, Sheila, on September 23rd, 1999, your life shifted instantaneously with your soul exchange experience. Can you take us back to that exact moment? What did the call feel like physically and energetically?
So, as I said, I was a very sick person at that time, and I went to bed sick. I had never read a metaphysical book. I had no knowledge of walk-ins. I'd never even heard the concept, but I went to bed a very sick person. And what felt like 7 o'clock the next morning, it was as if someone reached down and grabbed me by the hair of the head and pulled me bolt right up in bed. And then it was like lightning ran through my body. And then I was in white space. And I don't know how long I was in white space. I know I was very comfortable. I was out of pain. And had I been given the chance, I probably would have stayed wherever that was. But the next thing I know, I'm sitting up in bed and my peripheral vision starts coming in first, which was odd, and then the frontal vision. And as I sat there looking around the room, everything was the same, but everything was totally different. Everything. It was like if I looked at an item, it was almost like it started talking to me. And when I got up and placed my feet on the floor, it was as if I'd never even experienced carpet before. And then when I walked by the mirror and I caught my reflection, it was as if I was seeing out of somebody else's eyes. And I was mesmerized, not like from a vanity point of view, but I was just like captivated, and I was looking at my hair and my teeth and looking at my eyes and blink. And I remember this as if it were yesterday because it was such a visceral experience for me. And immediately, also, I began to have past life memories. All of these universal truths were, swirling around in my head. I had all of this information about healing that I had never studied, nor was I interested in, because I was in a Western medicine path, and my goodness, that's going to cure you. So anyway, everything was so different. Now, the thing about the past lives, the reason that's important is I didn't believe in them when I went to bed. I thought it was a cop-out, the biggest bunch of hooey I had ever heard in my life. So I had no idea. And actually, if someone would have told me I would have been having this conversation with you today, I would have laughed them out of my room.
Right.
So none of this was within my wheelhouse of thinking. The next thing that I noticed is, and I didn't know what it was at the time, all of a sudden I was clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. I had every clair that you could imagine. Everything was heightened and very raw. I could hear people speaking that were not in the room. I could see people walking around that were not there, that no one else could see. I remembered what it was like to slip out of the body, to come back into the body. I remembered what it was like to be on the other side, and the fact that there is no death and nothing to be afraid of. There was so much information that came back. My system was on total meltdown, but at the same time overload, yet healing exponentially, because all of my symptoms had gone away. Now, I didn't realize it at the time. Be honest with you, I was dazed and confused for days, actually. And when I would try to explain what happened to me to people, it was almost like they started backing away from me, and it was like, you
Like
can't be talking like that.
like you would have to someone else if the week prior to your event, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong. Like,
Exactly.
that's what you like. And no disrespect, but I think it's very funny that you admit you're like, if somebody told me this happened to them, I would think they're nutters.
I would have.
And I get it, and I think it's kind of really funny that you can have that wherewithal looking back and self-critical. It does make me laugh.
Well, and the reality of it is, when I had a past life regression with Barbara Lamb, who was actually my co-author, because she submitted all of the case studies for my second book. But when I went to her for a past life regression, we asked the team that came through, why did they choose this form? Why did they inhabit this? And their response was, if we could change her, we can change the world. Meaning, I was so shut down, I was so foreign, none of this would have made any sense to me. Now, it's the only sense, obviously, for myself. But they said that because I, number one, had no preconceived notions about spirituality because I was religious, huge difference, because that I had never read any metaphysical books. I had no awareness of anything outside of my little box, that I was a perfect candidate for this. Because if I could accept this, if their experiment worked, then it would be wonderful and it would work for other people as well. Now, when I talk about an experiment, I come in from a collective. And so that collective, then I am still connected to them. So it depends on the various aspect as to what needs to come through at what time, whether it's healing, teaching, etc. And so at that time, however, because the physical body had to heal, they had to come into a framework that would be suitable and not have the biology or the neurology fried. And so the beautiful thing about this form was the original soul to the body had been Arcturian. And so there was already an Arcturian framework within the system. Now, one of the other things that I do is I see grids when I work on people. I can see the distortions, the trauma body, the vertical columns, you name it, the ley lines, etc. But at that time, I had absolutely no knowledge of any of these things. So as they're talking to me about frameworks and this and that, it just blew my mind. So my physical brain, my learning, the knowledge, my lexicon had to kind of catch up with the soul resonance. And so first they had to change the neurology of the body, and then they started working on cellular memory. Now, one of the scary things that happened to me when I came in is I had no memory. Let me say this, I had very few memories. And I still don't have full memories, but I have a ton more than I used to because I just kept begging and begging. And I'm like, no, wait a minute, I don't want those memories. Just give me the good stuff, but it doesn't work that way. But when I first came in, I only had a few select memories of my children, their birthdays, the birth process, and my parents. And that was it. My mother even sat me down one time and said, I really think that you need to go to a doctor because I think you have the beginning stages of Alzheimer's.
Oh, geez.
And she was serious because I didn't know who my cousins were that I had grown up with. I didn't know people I had gone to high school with. I didn't know anything that people were talking to me about. So I really learned the art of deflection, and how to be a conversationalist and bring out what's happening with them before they started asking questions about me because I didn't have the background.
Yeah, I mean, all this stuff is challenging, especially, transitioning from the one personality that you were into the person that you are now. You've mentioned previously that you've integrated this walk-in experience that you've had with the help of a spiritual teacher. How did this mentor appear? And what foundational wisdom did they give you to survive the initial transition?
Sure. I was very guided, guarded, and blessed, and not everyone is. So Within 3 months, I had left the dysfunctional marriage. Within another 3 months, I had been hired to work in a different state again in tourism. When I went to check out the town where I would be moving, because now I'm a single mom with 3 children, I wanted to see what type of amenities were there for kids. At that time, we didn't have the Google. I did have a BlackBerry once I started working, but, I was flipping through the phone directory. And I came upon an ad. Honestly, it was kind of like the da-da kind of spotlight thing. And I saw an ad for a spiritual counselor. Well, by that time, 6 months in, I felt like I needed it because I had just enough psychology to think I was having a psychotic break because of everything happening to me. And so that is why I made the appointment. And within like the second visit, it was like, no, honey, there's, I can tell you right now, you're not having a psychotic break. And then she offered something different. She said, I believe you're a walk-in. And as she explained it, I got up and left. I was so angry because honestly, I went for the little blue pill. I thought she could write me a prescription. I could take it, go back to my dysfunctional life because I did not know how to operate, number one, without the memories, and number two, with everything that was happening to me, all the contact, everything that was occurring in my life. And so she not only was a counselor, but she was of Hopi lineage, and she invited me to meet some of the other women that she was working with because she had what's called spiritual circles. And so I started attending those, and that's where I learned about shamanism, which was my lifeline. That is what anchored me and really integrated me into this reality, because all of a sudden I had a language for what was occurring in my life. All of a sudden, these invisible people and these voices in my head were my spirit guide. They were my team. And then the experiences that I was having, I was able to frame that as I was having shamanic journeys, because I was going into these different places. I knew nothing about astral travel. I knew nothing about, shamanic travel, but that's exactly what I had been doing. And it was there that I truly anchored and through the shamanic journeys, because then I could go to these different locations and sit and be mentored to by my spirit team. So she was a very, very integral part of my life. And as a matter of fact, I became an apprentice to her and remained an apprentice to her until she dropped her robe last January.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Man, it's I do find it interesting how I always say life happens at the speed of life. And I do find it interesting how I always jokingly say, like, I communicate with reality. I pay attention to cues and things. And sometimes something happens, and it could be, someone crossing your path, and it's so synchronous sometimes, where you just have to like pause and a conversation happens, and you just I literally say like, thank you, Mother Nature, sometimes when things, it's just like, whoa, I needed that.
Yeah. I understand.
So like you said, within months of your awakening, you left your marriage, you took your children, you relocated to a new state, you took a completely new job. What gave you the courage to cross that threshold and leave the familiar completely behind? I mean, you must have, I don't know, like in my brain, I imagine I would feel kind of like a lunatic at that point.
I did feel like a lunatic, but I also felt like a very grounded lunatic. And that was not my life. I had no resonance with it, so why would I stay? My personality totally changed. Everything about me changed. I think my articulation level probably doubled. I'm not sure what happened there, but the reality of it is that life was not my life. Now, we have to realize when a walk-in soul exchange occurs, you're coming into a body that has already has cellular memory. It already has a history. So it's kind of like buying a used car. You have to get in, you have to clean it up, you have to, make it your own. And for a period of years, that's what I did. I had to work on clearing up the old behavior patterns, the old thought patterns, the old way of beingness. And I couldn't do that in that environment, nor was I drawn to it, or I lost every friend, needless to say, that I had. And then the people who I had surrounded myself with just sort of fell away because I had no resonance. You want to go out to dinner? No, not really. I mean, I was nicer than that, but it's like, oh, I can't go, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But everybody just kind of dropped away, which was paving the way, which I didn't know at the time, for me to step in to my new anchor location. And at that time when I moved, that was to Kentucky. And so I was there for a period of 5 years. And then I moved to Colorado and opened my own business and started seeing clients, etc. But, up until that point, it was really an anchor period. And as I began to release all these old patterns, I would ask my team, it's like, my God, I've worked on the same thing over and over and over. And they explained how, as we raise our vibratory frequency, that we have yet another set of situations that will arise that we also need to clean, because you have to realize our souls are eternal. We are pure consciousness compressed of the source energy. And so as a result of that, we have lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. They also explained to me karma is a little different than what I hear other people talk about, because they said karma are those things that you choose that you want to bring forward in a lifetime to work on. And that person that is your nemesis, that person that causes you the biggest heartache, the most aggravating person, is probably your bestie on the other side. And they are serving as triggering for you. Because then, when you get triggered, you have the opportunity to heal whatever that is. So with my students, that's what I always teach them. Always ask the questions, what am I learning? What is this reflecting back to me? What do I need to heal? It really has nothing to do with the other person. Absolutely nothing. So instead of being angry, you can actually be in gratitude to them for showing you this.
I think one of the things that I've self-educated on that I think is very accurate, and I hear from other people that are way smarter than I am, but I see it all the time. People get very agitated at other people that are harboring, I guess you would say, like negative character flaws that they see within themselves that they don't like. Mm-hmm. That gets people fired up. And
yes,
then they're
absolutely.
like, I don't like that person because they such and such. And you're like, you do that all the time.
Right, exactly.
It always makes me laugh.
And that's the mirror that I was talking about. They're reflecting back to you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Where is my next one here? Okay. As you mentioned, you had some challenges. But navigating a new identity while raising children and integration must have brought you severe challenges. What was the hardest trial you faced during those early years of anchoring your multidimensional soul into the physical density of Earth, like normalizing things? What obstacle? I mean, I can only imagine things were rough.
The biggest thing for me was manifestation. Took forever. I couldn't wrap my mind around the monetary thing, and I could not understand why people were in lack, why people were angry, because realize I just came from a place of pure cooperation, unity, oneness, etc., into this environment now. I didn't have all those memories, but I had the sensation, I had that knowing, that gift of discernment. And I actually had the 12 Lords of Karma to show up in my living room and walked me through all these lessons. And at the very end, the 12th one is discernment. And once I passed that, then I began, all of a sudden, it was like everything anchored in. And it was crazy because I'm in the shower and all of a sudden this big silver eye appears in the shower. Well, first thing you do is, you scream, there's an eyeball. And it opened and it blinked at me and almost passed out. The energy was so phenomenal. And it was like the whole bathroom shook, and it said, you've now been gifted you've now been given the gift of discernment. I was like,
That's wild.
then of course I had to run and look it up. What is discernment? I'm
It's so funny.
serious.
It's one of my favorite words. I throw it around liberally
Yes.
all the time. I hammer people with that. I speak with a lot of candor in a lot of different environments, and it always amazes me when people are not knowing something, and you're having a conversation, and they say, well, how am I supposed to know, and all this, and it's like, well, I mean, discernment, like life experience, like it's frustrating to me because I think oftentimes people should just admit they don't know then and bow out instead of having such staunch position and admittedly not knowing and saying they don't have the discernment. So how am I supposed to? Like,
Right. My biggest thing as I'm working with clients is to try to get them out of the head and into the heart, because in that heart space, then we realize that we're more than we've been told that we are. We can drop in to that soul self. My team told me a long time ago, they said there's a difference from knowing the path and walking the path. And there's a difference from walking the path and becoming the path. And so I had to walk the path to know the path to become the path itself. And that's what I always try to get people to do, is operate from that soul self. Operate from that eternalness, because then you can look at everything as a human experience. That's it. And not give it any validity. Because when you do, you're giving your personal power away. You're allowing someone else to define who you are, or you're accepting what they say about you, and then you get angry. Well, if you don't accept that as true, it's kind of like, I mean, it's like, okay, well, that's interesting. And that's what I just, if I encounter stuff, they're like, well, how do you handle this? And I'm like, well, I just say, that's a pretty interesting concept. And I just leave it at that, because it has nothing to do with me. And if people can detach from what other people think, from how they show up in the world, they want to show up with integrity. But if they understand that they're doing the best that they can each and every day, each and every moment, with an open heart and really curious. I love when people have a totally different outlook on life than I do, because I get to learn. I may not agree with them, but I still get to learn something. And if we can operate from that place of curiosity like the kids do, I mean, life is magical. And no matter what's happening out there, we can look at it as like, wow, look at that experience.
Absolutely. Speaking of paths and perfection, your path led you to earn a Master of Metaphysical Sciences and become ordained. How did formalizing your path academically help you map out what you call the cosmology of the soul?
Well, if you'll remember earlier on, I mentioned, I was very curious, and I just kept asking all these questions. I had no background at all about spirituality. And so I began to look and say, where could I find these things out? Because my team was very, very specific. They did not allow me to read. I still don't read it. I hate to say it, but I don't read other people's books. I have a plethora of them. My friends author them and give them to me, but I just don't read them. I just, because I want my knowing to stay my knowing. But I did need to have some kind of a language, some kind of a lexicon, in order for the team to even be able to provide higher level concepts. And so it was my team that encouraged me to do this. And so for me, it was a way, I feel like, to have a lot of what my internal knowing was validated, because I was walking around, even though I'm still doing all this cellular clearing and things, I'm like, yeah, okay, so I think this, but how do I know it's true? How do I know I'm not just making this stuff up? How do I know I'm really not still psychotic? And so I would just continue to question myself constantly. And I think that was actually a good and healthy thing, because I always looked to validate things. Okay. Even with my guides, I'd be like, well, tell it to me again, show me in a different way, bring it to me a couple more times. And they did. Because as a human, I really needed that until I was able to truly drop in to that flow of knowingness and trust, so that the things that they brought to me, I trust. Because believe me, I've wasted a lot of time questioning and second guessing them, only to end up doing exactly what they told me to do in the first place. And if I had only listened, I could have saved like years of work. So when this university came available to me, I jumped on it. And it really did. It gave me, a broader understanding of like divination, of the different religions. It really helped with a lot of, the concepts that I had, to be able to say, oh, that's what this, oh, that's sacred geometry. Oh, now the magic of 12th. Yeah, I got that now. What's the 369? Oh, yeah. And so by being able to study, it allowed me to be very comfortable in what I knew to be true. And I think that it served as kind of a springboard for my confidence, so that I knew that when I shared something with someone else, that it was true. And even today, I received healing programs from the Arcturians and the Andromedans and the angelic beings that I teach. And the first time that I taught, I was scared to death. I'm like, okay, I know it works for me, because I also use light language, and I tweak the fields with people because I can see the grids, and so I send codes in, etc. But it's like, how do I teach that? How can I make that replicable for other people? And they gave me the format in order to be able to do that, because they asked me to teach it. And I'm like, no, I'm not teaching that. I've developed this new technique. This is mine. And they're like, it's ours. And so we gave it to you to teach it. So, I started doing that. And as these things were replicable with other people, that also gave me yet another foundation in which to say, okay, yes, everything that's coming through is true.
I don't know if you realize how well your answers are setting up my next questions. I feel
Oh,
like this. I feel like there's
see,
something.
everything
Yeah,
happens for a reason.
yeah. You're giving your answers, and I'm looking at the next questions. And I'm going, this is perfect. Thank you. There usually comes a moment, when people are going through their hero's journey of life, where they must fully confront their shadow or their purpose. Was there a specific moment when you had to fully shed any remaining fear of public judgment to step out as a multi-dimensional healer? This person that you would have laughed at before?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it still continues. Remember, you just continue to shed and to shed and to shed. But for me, when I moved to Colorado and I didn't know well, first off, I have to say, when I came into this body, one of the gifts that I immediately had is I had the instinctual knowing that what someone else's opinion is about me doesn't really matter, because that's theirs. And I am not attached to any of that, any shape or form. So that gave me this clean slate, because remember, I'm a new person in this body. So I had different ideas about how to motivate through per the instructions of my team, because we're still driving it. And so when I first came out as a walk-in, when I wrote I was at a conference and I was speaking with a lady with ions, and someone had told her I was a walk-in. She's like, you need to come and make a presentation about this. Make a presentation. How do we even put this down on paper? So, my husband sat down with me. We went through this process. He's like, okay, now let's start at the beginning. And I literally did, how that's where all of a sudden all the remembrances that I had seen and still felt started to crystallize into like verbiage. And so I was then able to translate things and put it on paper. And then I started talking about the Shantias Khan. I started talking about, all of the various ways that we incarnate as a walk-in, or what is happening around us, how we can perceive these things. Had I been attached to being concerned about what people would think, I probably still would be sitting at home. And the reality is, too, I guess I maybe have taken it a little bit much, because when I first moved to Colorado, I was taking out ads in the local paper, shamanic healer, walk in, da 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 da. I literally had a knock on my door. It was someone from the newspaper, and they're like, look, we're happy to take your money for ads, but we're going to tell you, if you're going to make it in this town, you need to cool your jets. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, at the time, my little town, I mean, the word spirituality was still entangled with religion, and they're like, people are not used to these concepts. I mean, like, oh, you mean not everyone smudges the UPS man when they're bringing a package in because I wouldn't let him in my sacred space? Oh, you mean people don't smudge openly on the streets of Leadville? What? Are you kidding me? And so then it's like, oh, okay. So I did have to crank it back a little bit, but I think it was comfortable for me to share being a walk-in because I still couldn't wrap my brain around it. I still could not understand, how can one soul leave and another soul inhabit the body? And that became my quest. And when I first moved there, I was still kind of fresh in the body. I was there for like 4 years. And then that just truly became my quest even now. I'm constantly looking at, how does consciousness, come into form? What different forms are consciousness? What else is out there that we're not aware of? Oh yeah, consciousness is everything. Well, that makes sense to me. And so my team, some of the memories that I have go all the way back to the first source divisionals with all of the, inversion frequencies and the I ams and the template creations, and how those began to unfold, and how the oversoul, came into being. And I've been talking about, I talked about these things for like it's going on 26 years now, without even understanding really what it was I was talking about.
It's too funny. You did it again.
Oh, okay.
it's really cracking me up, Sheila. So, as you've mentioned, one of your core messages centers on the idea that humans are souls in a body having a human experience.
Correct.
When did this realization fully crystallize for you as the gift of truth you were meant to bring back to the world?
Pretty much immediately. Once I figured out there was something different, once I started working with my teacher, I immediately understood that I was a soul having this human experience. And in order to be a walk-in, there had to be this transition, which I remember, all the transitional. I remember, the upgradings of the field. And like I said, it had been an Arcturian format, which made it easy because as a collective, we operate from many galactic as well as other types of forms. And so there was an aspect that could kind of drip in to the physical form. And then as that anchored and as the biology began to shift, more and more could begin to come in. And as that was happening, I understood pretty quickly that, oh, yeah, I'm a soul having this experience, because I remembered being on the other side. Mm-hmm. I remembered being in soul form. I remembered being pure consciousness. And I still, like I said, it's as visceral today. There's some memories that have never faded one little bit.
Wow. It's
So
memory to me is also similarly intriguing like consciousness. I always like the line from the movie Forrest Gump when he says, it's funny the things that we remember. And it really is.
It is.
It's wild. Let's see here. Next question. Writing books like Walk-ins, The Cosmology of the Soul, and Cosmic Convergence requires translating complex, non-linear galactic concepts into human language. How challenging was it to build that bridge for the reader? And we touched on this earlier. You had mentioned, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, one of the biggest challenges I think that we have is that we are now delving into concepts that as a society we may not have breached in a really long time and maybe used to have the vernacular. But now we just, think things and no longer have the words. So, I mean, you touched on it before. How has that been, this issue for, I guess, getting people on the same page?
Well, for me, I never try to convince anyone of anything. I can only simply share my perspective and our viewpoints. And from that position, one of the things that is, I mean, it's just so deep within me, that inner knowingness of how things operate, that it's easy, because then I'm thinking, how would I explain this to my granddaughter? How do I explain this to people so I can meet them where they are and they don't think, well, they may think this lady's crazy, which is fine, but how do I explain it so that people can understand what it is that I'm talking about, and not think, ooh, you have to back up, because all of those friends that I lost, I'm like, man, you're not going to believe what happened to me, and this and this and this. And then I remembered, and I went here and I saw that. And, they're like, you're crazy. So everyone reinforced that. But now I don't want, more and more people are waking up. More and more people are having their own experiences. And so today it's much, much easier to explain higher level concepts without having to, speak from a scientific or a quantum viewpoint. Because remember, they said if we can change her mind, so as they would explain things to me, I'd be like, well, how? But why? How come? My team explained things to me in very simplistic, I mean, still high level, but simplistic terms that this brain could comprehend. And it would be like, okay, I understand now how that dynamic works. And it's so, for me, I mean, it just, it's just like we're sitting here conversing in language. English is my first language, and these concepts are also my first language, because that is the framework. That is how we operate as this human that we see. If we could see what we truly are, we would see that animation that, causes this vehicle to actually come to life. So what happens when someone passes? The soul leaves, animation stops. Okay? That's plain and simple what happened with my body. I asked him, I'm like, well, this was a sick body, so why did you choose this? Well, first, there was an agreement that was made. This soul was ready to leave for a variety of reasons, and I needed an adult form in which to walk in. I didn't need the birth experience. I didn't need the childhood. I needed an adult form so I could start my work, because I'm only here on mission, and that's it. It's not here. One time I said, gosh, when I finish this, I think I'm going to take a month off. And they're like, what, you think you're on vacation? No, you're here to work. That's what your job is. That's why you incarnated. And so for me, it's very important that I'm able to be able to explain things to people so that they get that aha and everything begins to make sense. Now, do they need to all understand about the 12 ley lines? No, but if they do, there's a whole healing that takes place in that. Do they need to understand about the 12 consciousness currents and how those come in and create our sovereignty container? Well, not unless they want to, because they operate whether or not we're thinking about it, just like our autonomic nervous system works, whether we think about it or not. So I've got everything from higher level concepts down to we are a soul having a human experience, because we are source consciousness compressed.
I've always felt way more comfortable with that concept, and there's just certain, I don't know, I would say observable truths that I've been very comfortable with, that I've harbored well before I've heard anyone else ever say them, and that was one of them. Is that
Beautiful.
we're souls riding a human horse.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish people understood that more.
Yes. I think things would be a lot different if they did.
Yeah, and what gets me with that one too is I think it's ancient programming that we're so afraid of death. Mm-hmm. Look at the power that people wield over us.
It is.
It's very unfortunate.
One of the beautiful things that my team has shown me is, there's the false matrixing programming, the thoughts of, separation, illness, etc. And there's teaching after teachings about those. However, for this conversation, I'm sorry,
Go
for
right ahead.
this conversation, one of the things that I want to share with people is, when we drop in to knowing who we are, when we drop into just being, and we can allow ourselves to expand out of who we are, and we can begin to understand that we're all connected. We can begin to understand that we are all one larger spirit, that that you are a reflection of me, I'm a reflection of you, etc., etc. When we can actually start operating that way, everything around us changes. When we accept that, all of a sudden we begin to see all of that separation programming from that false matrix begins to dissipate. And they showed me how, when someone has a spiritual awakening, there is a certain codon that goes on inside of our DNA strand. And that's within the 2 DNA strand. We're not talking about the 12 DNAs. I'm talking about the 2 that science is very well aware of with all the junk. There's part of that junk that begins to activate with a spiritual awakening. And what that does is then it expands our awareness to begin to understand that we're not separate. It begins to allow us to understand the healing can be instantaneous. It begins to allow us to accept that we're more than what we have been told that we are. And even if it doesn't fully disengage us from the false matrix, we now have that choice. And that's where our free will comes back fully online.
Wow. Yeah. There's another interesting topic, free will.
Oh, yeah.
What a world we're in nowadays. Sheila, today you operate in the high frequency spiritual spaces through things like the Institute of Living Light Archives, but you also manage very grounded multimedia platforms like the Conscious Awakening Network. How do you successfully balance being a master of both worlds, the cosmic and the everyday earthly?
Well, and even right now, I am helping to caretake my 91-year-old dad. And I find that I can drop into gratitude with any of these things, whether it's whatever the job is. Now, obviously, I could no longer function in a 9-to-5 job. I'm entrepreneur by essence, and by essential nature. And so for me, I have that luxury of I know 100% who I am. And I'm able to caretake, like with my dad, thinking, well, isn't this an interesting experience how we age? And isn't this interesting? And I really find a lot of joy in the everyday things. And then, of course, it's natural to want to share those with people. So the Conscious Awakening Network came about as a way for people to connect with each other, but for synergy to occur by many voices sharing a similar truth, so that maybe my story doesn't resonate with someone, but maybe yours would. Or if yours doesn't, maybe someone else's. But it was to, begin to develop a platform whereas more voices had the opportunity to be heard in hopes of awakening more and more people.
Excellent. Well, Sheila, I have one last question for you. This is the biggie.
Okay.
As a way shower for planetary ascension, what is the ultimate future you are trying to help humanity manifest? If someone listening is currently sitting in their own ordinary world, feeling a confusing call to change, what is your primary message to them?
Well, as always, you are a soul having a human experience, and you are so much more powerful than you have been told that you are. And I would invite people to begin to look outside of themselves. And as they see the state of the world, not see it that things are collapsing, but see the newness that's coming out of it. You know, you have to break through the old in order for the new to happen. Even someone who's breaking through an old behavior pattern in order for the newness to come through. Nobody said ascension's going to be easy. Nobody told us that. But as humans, we would like for it to be. But as we feel uncomfortable, if we can look at that as a sign that we're growing, and just like a kid has all the leg cramps and the arms and everything, that you're having those growing pains. So look at these ascension symptoms as a growing pain. And if you don't understand something, you don't agree with it, still try to find, like, what is that silver lining there? What is a gift that I can take away from that? Even if that gift is, you know what? I stand firm in my truth, and I am grateful to know who I am at the core of my being. So cut yourself some slack. Realize that we're having a human experience, and in 100 years, this isn't going to matter. Really, it's not. And so, you know, try to look at life that way. This is a human experience. What can you learn from that? How much fun can you have? You know, instead of looking at things as an obligation, look at it as a gift that you've been given. We think that life is a long time, but man, it is a blip on the radar screen.
Absolutely, Sheila. I oftentimes in my brain, I think of this life experience, right? This one where I was born, and I wake up in the morning and I go to bed at night, and I do that for X amount of years before I pass away. I look at this particular experience as a school. And it's here to teach us one thing. Because there's only one thing that we control in this experience. And that's our intentions. Mm-hmm. So I look at this classroom as it's just an environment to practice the application of your intentions and see how they pan out. Because I'm a tradesman, so I work with my hands for decades, right? You would think after 30 years in the trade, right? Wielding my hand, I cannot possibly drop something. I have to be proficient, right?
Right.
I've never intended to drop anything, but my own hands can fail me when I intend to do right. So if I can't control my own body with my intentions, what do I control outside of that?
Yeah,
so
it's all about our choices and how we choose to look at things. Mm-hmm. So, two people can have the exact same experience, and it's devastating for one, and it serves as a growth for the other. And so, just like you're saying, looking at our intentions, choosing how we're going to respond. Mm-hmm. And if we make those choices, then we're the ones that's in the driver's seat. Mm-hmm. And life doesn't happen to us. We're there in that flow, and we just make the decision to keep going forward.
Absolutely. Well, Sheila, thank you so much for this conversation. Mm-hmm. I think you have a very wonderful energy. I look forward to meeting you at Seppi and chatting more. But for the general audience that's listening, what would be the best place if they wanted to follow your work and your efforts and find out more about what you're up to? Where should they go take a look?
Yeah, they can go to my website at SheilaSeppi.com. That's SheilaSeppi, P as in Paul, P as in Paul, I.com.
Excellent. Folks, go check it out. And don't forget, if you're interested in seeing Sheila speak at Seppi this year, go to snippi.space to find out more. And Sheila, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Be well.